Athaliah was Ahaziah's mother. She saw that her son was dead, so she got up and killed all the king's family. Jehosheba was King Joram's daughter and Ahaziah's sister. Joash was one of the king's sons. While the other children were being killed, Jehosheba took Joash and hid him. She put him and his nurse in her bedroom. So Jehosheba and the nurse hid Joash from Athaliah. That way Joash was not killed. Then Joash and Jehosheba hid in the Lord's temple. Joash hid there for 6 years. During that time, Athaliah ruled over the land of Judah. Athaliah was Ahaziah's mother. When she saw that her son was dead, she killed all the king's children in Judah. But Jehosheba took Ahaziah's son Joash and hid him. Jehosheba put Joash and his nurse in the inside bedroom. Jehosheba was King Jehoram's daughter. She was also Jehoiada's wife. Jehoiada was a priest, and Jehosheba was Ahaziah's sister. Athaliah did not kill Joash because Jehosheba hid him. Joash was hidden with the priest in God's temple for 6 years. During that time, Athaliah ruled over the land as queen. In the 7th year, Jehoiada, the high priest, sent for the captains of the Kerites and guards. He brought them together in the Lord's temple and made an agreement with them. There, in the temple of the Lord, he forced them to make a promise. Then he showed the king's son to them. Then Jehoiada gave them a command. He said, "This is what you must do. 1/3 of you, from those who go on duty on the Sabbath day, must stand guard at the royal palace. Another third will be at the sheer gate, and the other third will be at the gate behind the guard. This way you will stand guard over the palace on all sides. Your 2 divisions who go off duty on the Sabbath day will stand guard at the Lord's temple and protect King Joash. You must stay with him wherever he goes. The whole group must surround the king. Each guard must have his weapon in his hand, and you must kill anyone who comes too close to you." The captains obeyed everything that Jehoiada the priest commanded. Each captain took his men, both those who were going on duty on the Sabbath day and those who were going off duty. All these men went to Jehoiada the priest, and he gave spears and shields to the captains. These were the spears and shields David put in the Lord's temple. These guards stood with their weapons in their hands, from the right corner of the temple to the left corner. They stood around the altar and the temple and around the king when he went to the temple. These men brought out Joash. They put the crown on him and gave him a copy of the agreement. Then they anointed him and made him the new king. They clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king!" After 6 years, Jehoiada showed his strength and made an agreement with the captains. These captains were Azariah, son of Jeroham, Ishmael, son of Jehohanan, Azariah, son of Obed, Maaseiah, son of Adaiah, and Elishaphat, son of Zichri. They went around in Judah and gathered the Levites from all the towns of Judah. They also gathered the leaders of the families of Israel. Then they went to Jerusalem. All the people meeting together made an agreement with the king in God's temple. Jehoiada said to the people, "The king's son will rule. That is what the Lord promised about David's descendants. Now, this is what you must do. 1/3 of you priests and Levites who go on duty on the Sabbath will guard the doors. And 1/3 of you will be at the king's palace, and 1/3 of you will be at the foundation gate. But all the other people will stay in the yards of the Lord's temple. Only the priests and Levites who serve in the Lord's temple are permitted to enter it. They are the only ones who have been made holy. Don't let anyone else enter. All the others must do only the work the Lord has given them. The Levites must stay near the king. Every man must have a sword with him. If anyone tries to enter the temple, kill that person. You must stay with the king everywhere he goes." The Levites and all the people of Judah obeyed all that Jehoiada the priest commanded. Jehoiada the priest did not excuse anyone from groups of the priests. So each captain and all his men came in on the Sabbath with those who went out on the Sabbath. Jehoiada the priest gave the spears and the large and small shields that belonged to King David to the officers. The weapons were kept in God's temple. Then Jehoiada told the men where to stand. Every man had his weapon in his hand. The men stood all the way from the right side of the temple to the left side of the temple. They stood near the altar and the temple, and near the king. They brought out the king's son and put the crown on him. They gave him a copy of the agreement. Then they made Joash king. Jehoiada and his sons anointed Joash and said, "Long live the king!" Queen Athaliah heard the noise from the guards and the people. So she went to them at the Lord's temple. Athaliah saw the king by the column where new kings usually stood. She also saw the leaders and men playing the trumpets for him. She saw that all the people were very happy. She heard the trumpets, and she tore her clothes to show she was upset. Then Athaliah shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada the priest gave a command to the captains who were in charge of the soldiers. Jehoiada told them, "Take Athaliah outside of the temple area. Kill any of her followers, but don't kill them in the Lord's temple." So the soldiers grabbed Athaliah and killed her as soon as she went through the horses' entrance at the palace. Athaliah heard the noise of the people running to the temple and praising the king. She came into the Lord's temple to the people. She looked and saw the king standing by his column at the front entrance. The officers and the men who blew trumpets were near the king. The people of the land were happy and blowing trumpets. The singers were playing on instruments of music. They led the people in singing praises. Then Athaliah tore her clothes and said, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada the priest brought out the army captains. He said to them, "Take Athaliah outside among the army. Use the swords to kill anyone who follows her." Then the priest warned the soldiers, "Don't kill Athaliah in the Lord's temple." Then those men grabbed Athaliah when she came to the entrance of the horse gate at the king's palace. Then they killed her there. Then Jehoiada made the agreement between the Lord and the king and the people. This agreement showed that the king and the people belonged to the Lord. Jehoiada also made the agreement between the king and the people. Then all the people went to the temple of Baal. They destroyed the statue of Baal and his altars. They broke them into many pieces. They also killed Baal's priest, Mattan, in front of the altars. So Jehoiada the priest put men in charge of maintaining the Lord's temple. The priests led all the people. They went from the Lord's temple to the king's palace. The king's special guards and the captains went with the king, and all the other people followed them. They went to the entrance to the king's palace. Then King Joash sat on the throne. All the people were happy, and the city was peaceful. The queen Athaliah was killed with a sword near the king's palace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. Then Jehoiada made an agreement with all the people and the king. They all agreed that they all would be the Lord's people. All the people went to the temple of the idol Baal and tore it down. They also broke the altars and idols that were in Baal's temple. They killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars of Baal. Then Jehoiada chose the priests to be responsible for the Lord's temple. The priests were Levites, and David had given them the job of being responsible for the Lord's temple. They were to offer the burnt offerings to the Lord the way the law of Moses commanded. They offered the sacrifices with much joy and singing, the way David commanded. Jehoiada put guards at the gates of the Lord's temple to prevent any unclean person from entering the temple. Jehoiada took the army captains, the leaders, the rulers of the people, and all the people of the land with him. Then Jehoiada took the king out of the Lord's temple. They went through the upper gate to the king's palace and put the king on the throne. All the people of Judah were very happy, and the city of Jerusalem had peace because Athaliah was killed with a sword. Joash began to rule during Jehu's 7th year as king of Israel. Joash ruled 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother was named Zibiah of Beersheba. For as long as he lived, Joash did what the Lord considered right. He did what Jehoiada the priest taught him. But he did not destroy the high places. The people still made sacrifices and burned incense at those places of worship. Joash said to the priest, "There is much money in the Lord's temple. People have given things to the temple and have paid the temple tax when they were counted. And they have given money simply because they wanted to. You priests should take that money and repair the Lord's temple. Each priest should use the money he gets from the people he serves. He should use that money to repair the damage to the temple." In the 23rd year that Joash was king, the priest still had not repaired the temple. So King Joash called for Jehoiada the priest and the other priests. Joash said to them, "Why haven't you repaired the temple? Stop taking money from the people you serve. That money must be used to repair the temple." The priests agreed to stop taking money from the people, but they also decided not to repair the temple. So Jehoiada the priest took a box and made a hole in the top of it. He put the box on the south side of the altar. This box was by the door where people came into the Lord's temple. Some of the priests were there to guard this doorway. They took the money that people brought for the Lord's temple and put it into this box. Whenever the king's secretary and the high priest saw that the box was full, they counted all the money that had been given for the Lord's temple and put it in bags. Then they paid the men who were in charge of the work on the Lord's temple. They paid the carpenters and other builders who worked on the Lord's temple. They used that money to pay the stone workers and stone cutters, and they used it to buy timber, cut stone, and everything else to repair the Lord's temple. People gave money for the Lord's temple, but the priests could not use this money to make silver cups, snuffers, basins, trumpets, or any of the gold and silver dishes that were to be used inside the Lord's temple. This money was used only to pay the workers who repaired the Lord's temple. Those who were in charge of paying the workers did not have to give a report of how they spent the money, because they could be trusted. People gave money when they offered guilt offerings and sin offerings, but that money was not used for the Lord's temple. It belonged to the priest. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. He ruled 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah. Zibiah was from the town of Beersheba. Joash did right in front of the Lord, as long as Jehoiada the priest was living. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for Joash. Joash had sons and daughters. Then later on, Joash decided to rebuild the Lord's temple. Joash called the priests and the Levites together. He said to them, "Go out to the towns of Judah and gather the money all the Israelites pay every year. Use that money to rebuild your God's temple. Hurry and do this." But the Levites didn't hurry. So King Joash called Jehoiada the leading priest. The king said, "Jehoiada, why haven't you made the Levites bring in the tax money from Judah and Jerusalem? Moses, the Lord's servant, and the Israelites used that tax money for the tent of the agreement. In the past, Athaliah's sons broke into God's temple and used the holy things in the Lord's temple for their worship of the Baal gods. Athaliah was a very wicked woman. King Joash gave a command for a box to be made and put outside the gate at the Lord's temple. Then the Levites made an announcement in Judah and Jerusalem. They told the people to bring in the tax money for the Lord. That tax money is what Moses, the servant of God, had required the Israelites to give while they were in the desert. All the leaders and the people were happy. They brought their money and put it in the box. They continued giving until the box was full. Then the Levites would take the box to the king's officials. They saw that the box was full of money. The king's secretary and the leading priest officer came and took the money out of the box. Then they took the box back to its place again. They did this often and gathered much money. Then King Joash and Jehoiada gave the money to the people who worked on the Lord's temple. And the people who worked on the Lord's temple hired skilled woodcarvers and carpenters to rebuild the Lord's temple. They also hired workers who knew how to work with iron and bronze to rebuild the Lord's temple. The men who supervised the work were very faithful. The work to rebuild the temple was successful. They built God's temple the way it was before, and they made it stronger. When the workers finished, they brought the money that was left to King Joash and Jehoiada. They used that money to make things for the Lord's temple. These things were used for the service in the temple and for offering burnt offerings. They also made bowls and other things from gold and silver. The priest offered burnt offerings in the Lord's temple every day while Jehoiada was alive. Jehoiada became old. He had a very long life, and he died when he was 130 years old. The people buried Jehoiada in the city of David, where the kings are buried. The people buried Jehoiada there because in his life he did much good in Israel for God and for God's temple. After Jehoiada died, the leaders of Judah came and bowed to King Joash. The king listened to the leaders. They all stopped worshiping at the temple of the Lord, the God their ancestors worshipped. Instead, they started worshiping Asherah poles and other idols. Because they sinned in this way, God was angry with the people of Judah and Jerusalem. God sent prophets to the people to bring them back to the Lord. The prophets warned them, but they refused to listen. The Spirit of God filled Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada the priest, and he stood in front of the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you people refuse to obey the Lord's commands? You will not be successful. You have left the Lord. so he has also left you." But the people made plans against Zechariah. The king commanded the people to kill Zechariah, so they threw rocks at him until he was dead. The people did this in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. Joash the king didn't remember Jehoiada's kindness to him. Jehoiada was Zechariah's father, but Joash killed Zechariah, Jehoiada's son. Before Zechariah died, he said, "May the Lord see what you are doing and punish you." At that time, the Lord began to cut away sections of Israel and give them to other nations. King Hazael from Aram defeated the Israelites on every border of Israel. He won the land east of the Jordan River, all the land of Gilead, including the land that belonged to the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh. He won all the land from Aror by the Arnon Valley to Gilead and Bashan. All the other great things that Jehu did are written in the book, the history of the kings of Israel. Jehu died and was buried with his ancestors. The people buried him in Samaria. His son Jehoahaz became the new king of Israel after him. Jehu ruled over Israel and Samaria for 28 years.